Welcome back to a Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. On Sunday, famed director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were found murdered in their home. A horrible tragedy. Any other president would, at the very least, have offered the regular platitudes, the thoughts and prayers, that it's not a time for division. We have to come together as a nation to mourn the loss of this individual. The decent thing to do, even if it was not particularly meaningful, just going through the motions of making a good public statement in the wake of this horrible event. But even that was too much for our president. Instead of even faking compassion, he instead posted on his social media account that the murder was, quote, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affection with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS, who is known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession with President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights. May Rob and Michelle rest in peace. Those callous and uncaring words about the death of a beloved director and actor seemed so callous and unfeeling that some initially thought it had to be fake. The idea that he would make the murder of a man and his wife in their home all about himself seemed almost beyond the pale, but at the same time entirely on brand for President Donald Trump. But if there had been even a slight doubt that this was genuinely Donald Trump and genuinely what he was feeling, he dispelled those doubts when he told journalists, well, I wasn't a fan of him at all. He was a very deranged person. I thought he was very bad for our country. And there it is, basically the President of the United States saying that the death of Rob Reiner was deserved because of the crime of not loving Donald Trump. Pretty bad stuff, folks. Pretty bad. Even for Donald Trump, this is pretty bad. Anytime you think he's sunk as low as he possibly could, he finds depths even lower to sink to. This seems almost emblematic of his time as president. As soon as you think things have gotten as bad as they could possibly get, he finds a way to make them even worse. The fact that tact and compassion were completely foreign concepts to him is not news, but this recent statement about the death of Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle really put in sharp display that it's not an act, it's not a facade. Donald Trump just is an awful person who says awful things because he believes and feels awful thing. Trump's vile vitriol comes off even worse when put up next to the response by former President Barack Obama, who posted on his own social media, quote, Michelle and I are heartbroken by the tragic passing of Rob Reiner and his beloved wife Michelle. Rob's achievements in film and television gave us some of our most cherished stories on screen. But beneath all the stories he produced, he was deep belief in the goodness of people and a lifelong commitment to putting that belief into action. Together, he and his wife lived lives defined by purpose. They will be remembered for their values they championed, the countless people they inspired. We send our deepest condolences to all who love them. That's how a president should respond to this sort of event. Not even just a president, just a decent human being. But of course, a decent human being is too much of an ask for Donald Trump. His statements were so bad, even some of his fellow Republicans had to come out against it. And considering just how lockstep every Republican has been with everything he said and done, that's really saying something. Representative Mike Lawler from New York said that post was, quote, wrong, and that regardless of one's political views, no one should be subjected to violence, let alone at the hands of their own son. It is a horrible tragedy that should engender sympathy and compassion from everyone in our country, period. Republican Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky called it inappropriate and said that, quote, regardless of how you felt about Rob Reiner, this is inappropriate and disrespectful discourse about a man who was just brutally murdered. I guess my elected GOP colleagues, the vice president, and White House staff will just ignore it because they're afraid? I challenge anyone to defend it. I actually had to double check to make sure that that was a Republican who was saying that, because it seemed so out of character for someone in the Republican Party to just basically come out and say, other people in my party are afraid to challenge this and call it out for what it is. So I feel I almost have to applaud Representative Massey for actually saying what a lot of people are probably thinking and didn't feel like they could put into words. While he didn't directly name the president or the president's statements, even conservative actor and frequent Trump supporter James Woods said in a recent appearance on Fox News, "When people say horrible things about Rob right now, I find it quite frankly infuriating and distasteful. Did I agree with his politics? I did not. Did I love him as a friend, as an artist, as an icon of Hollywood, and as a patriot? I most certainly did. And I am just absolutely devastated by this terrible event, especially for his family. We had a different path to the same destination, which was a country that we both loved. And when people would say terrible things to me on social media about him, I would say, you got it all wrong." It wasn't even just fellow Republican government officials or prominent conservative voices who took issue with the president's awful commentary. A lot of his base of just regular Republican people came out against it with comments like, "I respect you so much, but this was heartless and uncalled for," or "You could have just said rest in peace. Love you, Mr. President, but none of the other stuff was needed. It is very sad that we are living in the world that we live in right now." Or just, "Come on, Mr. President, not an appropriate thing to write." Others said, "Trump really said, how can I make this horrific murder of a father and mother about me?" Shaking my head, shameful. But while it's nice to see even the base average Donald Trump supporter not be okay with the president's words, it's hard to feel like it's going to mean or do anything substantive. His base isn't going to turn on him. His fellow Republicans in government aren't going to actually condemn him beyond just saying, "Oh, yeah, he really shouldn't have said that. That wasn't okay." He gets away with everything and will continue to get away with everything because there are no guardrails. There is no more accountability. If the President of the United States can basically insinuate that, hey, not liking me sometimes is fatal, just saying, things have very clearly gotten pretty bad. Or, as the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today magazine, Russell Moore, put it, how this vile, disgusting, and immoral behavior has become normalized in the United States is something that our descendants will study in school to the shame of our generation. Because, yeah, Donald Trump has ushered us into a time in history that is going to be studied in the future and looked down on with derision, rightfully so. We're living through the times that in the future they're going to look back and say, oh, they lived like that? I can't believe it. I could never. President Trump really has normalized hate and divisive rhetoric to a point that, as awful as the things he said was, I was completely unshocked by them. Well, some saw that statement as possibly fake because there was no way he went that hard, literally right after a brutal slaying of a husband and his wife. I thought, no, of course it's real. This is exactly how he talks about the people he doesn't like. He couldn't come out and say, yeah, I'm glad he's dead, but he got pretty close. And the fact that I read that and didn't have to question even for a moment that this was 100% genuine Trump is disturbing. A president should not speak like that about anyone, friend or foe. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle they are. It is simply unacceptable that someone at that high office could ever publicly make those statements. If social media existed back in his time, not even Richard Nixon, a president who was filled with hate for his enemies, would never say something like this in a public-facing manner, and then when given the chance, double down on it to reporters. To say Donald Trump is a national shame and a national embarrassment is almost getting tired because we know this and it doesn't seem to make any difference. Without a doubt, history will look back at these times with disappointment, wondering how we could allow ourselves to live in such hate and misery. And why couldn't we just see how bad things were while we were living it? And while obviously I can't speak directly to those future people, if I could, I would tell them that we do understand how bad it is. But there are far too many people who either do not care or in some cases actually relish in it because those who are being hurt and affected are those that they do not care for, therefore have no compassion for. For so long, there was the question, how could regular, everyday Germans allow a horrible fascist dictator to take over their country and drive the entire nation into a world war? Couldn't they see how awful he was and how bad he was going to be for them? But now that we're living through that again, we can actually answer that question. And the answer is, of course, yes, because some of them actually want that. And others feel, well, as long as they don't come for me or my family or the people that I know, I don't have to deal with it or the implications. I almost don't have to wonder how future generations will look back on us because I can already look backwards to look forwards. It will be with a mixture of pity, bewilderment, and scorn. Actually, probably a lot more scorn now for the current times than they were back in 1930s Germany, because at least in 1930s Germany, they didn't have a precedent set. But now we already know where this is going, and we are allowing it to happen a second time. We had the benefit of hindsight, and we still went down the road of authoritarian fascism. So while they will undoubtedly feel shame for us in the future, we already feel shame for us in the present, because Donald Trump makes us all feel great shame. And for those that he doesn't, they are the ones who should feel the greatest amount of shame. So to close the episode, I'll leave you with the words of the now sadly departed Rob Reiner, who said, "The most important thing is that you be a good person and you live by the golden rule of do unto others. If you live by that, that's all I care about." Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time when I cut you off another slice of news.